And really, that was some of the meaning in this case, is that this is a corporation who's exercising all of their power, and their resources to cheat an individual who they had horribly injured.
Welcome to another episode of Cases Gone Wild with your host, me, Jonathan Marko, brought to you by Marko Law. I'm really excited to have you all here today because we have a very special guest. He's a jury consultant. He helps you pick juries. He's a psychologist. He's an author. He's a war veteran. He's just about everything that you can imagine. We have Steve Hnat, who has worked on some of the biggest cases in the country, has been involved in some of the biggest verdicts. So this is going to be a special show today. He's worked with Jeffrey Feiger. He's worked with probably every successful attorney in Michigan and across the country. Each show I bring to you some of the craziest cases and stories of Cases Gone Wild, and today's going to be no different. Don't forget, if you like our show, please follow us or like us. You can follow us on Spotify, but also we have a YouTube channel where you can watch the show and you can see us actually interact. And today it's a little in the afternoon, so we're going to be drinking some beer and wine. And I can show you Steve's book, which is Authentic Attorney, author Stephen Hnat, which is an amazing book for any attorney or aspiring attorneys out there. And let me tell you a little bit about Steve. So I've known Steve for a long time, ever since I was kind of a baby lawyer, and he's tried to help me advance my career. Steve is a graduate of Cass Tech High School here in Detroit. He served in the armed forces during the Vietnam War. He attended the University of Michigan. He earned undergraduate and graduate degrees with statistical analysis, psychology, and social work. And you're currently attending, Steve, I understand, Wayne State with a focus on theoretical physics, right, which is sounds pretty deep. But welcome to the show, Steve. That's a pretty impressive resume you got there.
Thanks, John, and congratulations on your podcast. I've been following it. It's pretty cool.
Thank you, dude. Thank you. Well, did I cover everything? Tell us, a little bit about yourself. How did you begin to do this work? You have a background in social work. You can definitely psychoanalyze people, because I know you've done it to me, and you found horrible, troubling things in my psyche.
I was a little concerned at first, but not anymore. Right?
Okay. You're just used to it now. But tell us, so how did you get into this work? How did you help lawyers?
It was almost serendipitous, really. And of all the things, if anyone's ever seen the movie Casablanca, there's Rick's American Cafe.
Yeah.
Well, there's a Rick's American Cafe in Ann Arbor, right? And I happened to be in the bar one day, and I met a dude who was there drinking, and we struck up a conversation. It turned out to be Jeff Feiger.
No way. You met Feiger at a bar?
At Rick's American Cafe, right?
How old was he?
Oh, he had just passed the bar.
Oh, my gosh.
He had just passed the bar, and he'd already filed his first case.
Sounds like Jeff.
And coincidentally, it was a woman who was a patient at a research floor that I was actually doing my doctoral research in.
No way.
I was doing research in psychobiology, and she happened to be a patient. So he was, it was a tardive dyskinesia case, a malpractice case. She was misdiagnosed, was given the wrong given medications that ultimately caused tardive dyskinesia, which is a permanent, neurological condition. And I explained, what the basically the neuropharmacology.
So this is just
we just ran into each other.
Jeffrey
right?
Feiger at a bar. Yeah. You don't know him.
Nope.
Probably nobody knew him at that time.
No. Well, nobody outside of his family.
Nobody
right?
outside of his family.
Yeah.
And you just start shooting the shit about a case?
No, we were talking about girls, but that's a different thing altogether. But ultimately, he asked what I did, I asked what he did, and we figured out, holy cow, we're connected by this patient who was his client. And, I became his expert on neurobiology, and I sort of explained how the drugs work on the brain and how it created the dyskinesia and stuff. And We struck up a friendship. He won the trial. He went to trial, won it, $1 million.
First case
verdict.
I understand he ever tried. It's like a
First
famous
case.
story, right?
Yeah, yeah. First case he ever did.
Now, did you act as a jury consultant on that case?
No, at the time, I'd never heard of anything like a jury consultant, and I don't think Jeff had either. I was just consulting with him, and ultimately, eventually, we got to the point where we would talk about his cases. He'd give me a call, he'd buy me dinner, and we'd talk about cases. He had a case one time, not long after that, it was a OBGYN case where a doctor was doing some experimental procedure on vaginismus, which is like a painful contraction of the vagina, and he mutilated this woman.
Oh my God.
And so, he said, look, I've got to, I got to do closing. Do I show these pictures
of the vagina
to the jury? Yeah, right. And I looked at him and I said, oh my God, this is terrible. I said, well, what's your jury like? 4 men and 4 women. I says, well, I would show it because it shows the damage, but I wouldn't. You don't have to show the men anything else other than that. They'll just say, "Oh my God, give her whatever she wants."
Yeah.
And I'm not being I don't mean to, I'm not being sexist about it, but it's a different way of thinking that women have about it. And I said, for the women, the only thing you need to say is talk with them about what it would be like for this poor woman in her most, what should be the most intimate, joyful moment of her life, right? Like her wedding night or the first time she was ever, sexual with her lover or whatever.
Yeah. How
it should be like a joyful, sort of exciting time. She's going to be in dread. She'll be fearful, and so it took away, not just her body image, but an emotional cost associated with it. And that's really what you need to talk with, the jury about, because that's really what the meaning of those damages are. And he did.
Right.
And I think he won $16 million on that.
Wow.
That case.
And you had no previous lawsuit experience or anything like that? This was just kind of like, you kind of fell into it then?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Ultimately, once he got involved with Kevorkian, then, I came on full time, at that point. I really liked the work. Part of what I liked about it was that, as a psychologist, I'm used to working with individuals and helping to change their lives. But I found that, trial lawyers like yourself, you get involved with cases that actually change society, and so the kind of change that you can affect, legally, and through the work that I do as a trial consultant or jury, consultant, actually changes social policy. And Kevorkian was just a prime example of that.
And we're going to talk today about Dr. Jack Kevorkian, which is a very famous case for those out there who don't know. It was involved a physician who was helping people make end-of-life decisions and basically with terminal illness, take away their own life, which was a very controversial and also worldwide, nationally known case. And for our listeners too, what a jury consultant is, if you're not a lawyer, is you do a lot. So, and I've used you on a lot of my cases. I know some of the best trial lawyers across the country use you. Ben Johnson, obviously you've told us Jeffrey Feiger, Craig Hilborn, Jerry Spence. The list goes on and on and on and on. In fact, I don't go to trial anymore on a single case that I don't consult with you on. And the reason being is you do more than just, first of all, you help pick a jury, right? And what that means is you come there and you help identify people who are going to be understanding and have a level of fairness and empathy towards our client and our cause. But you do more than just help us pick a jury. You help us frame the issues. And like you gave with that case with Jeff involving that mutilated private is, some people are more receptive to different things than others. And there's also a level of understanding, like you understand the medicine, you help really convey the emotional aspect of things. So you do more than just pick a jury. And so, I don't think it would be fair to just say you're just a jury consultant and you're an author.
Right.
You wrote a book, This Authentic Attorney, which by the way, I don't think I appear until like page 130 or something. I'm buried in like a footnote at the back of the book.
Oh, right.
But you wrote a book on attorneys on how to be authentic.
Yeah.
And it's called The Winning Psychology of Great Trial Lawyers. And this book, which I've read several times, talks about some of the greatest trial lawyers and how and their approach to things and how to be authentic.
And how they evolved. Jeffrey had to evolve. Everybody evolves. You had to evolve. I think probably, we talk about the Griffy case that we worked together. That was, one of the times where, I kind of look for, different aspects of attorneys. Part of how I see my job at this point is to help attorneys to be better attorneys, to be better human beings and to be better attorneys. And watching you evolve through that trial, was a good thing for me, to see
it was a
happen.
good thing for me too.
Yeah. Well, you did the job, right?
Yeah.
You should.
So the Griffy case was, it was the first 8-figure verdict I had ever gotten. I think we got $12 million. It was up in Genesee County, which is Flint, Michigan, and it involved an African-American couple. There was Lisa Griffy, who was an African-American probation officer from Detroit, and she worked for the Michigan Department of Corrections. And her husband was Cedric Griffy, who was a corrections officer. And he worked his way up from being like a corrections officer, that's like a fancy word for jailer, to a assistant deputy warden, which was like next to warden. I mean, very high thing. So he takes a transfer up to Lapeer, which is in northern Michigan. Lapeer's east of Flint, Michigan, largely Caucasian area. And his wife has to transfer too because they move up there from Detroit. And she starts getting horribly racially harassed. She's the only black woman in this county building of like 100 people. Everyone else is white. They call her the black one. They make all these racist comments.
Right. Instead of saying good morning, ma'am, it's good morning, mammy.
Good morning, mammy, which is a really racist slave term for a black woman who nursed the whites' children. And they asked her if she wanted chitlins on her pizza. I mean, I could go on and on, all kind of horrible stuff. Yeah. But anyways, this went on for quite some time. And her husband, who also worked for Department of Corrections up there, Cedric, complained. And shortly thereafter, he was terminated. So he complained on behalf of his wife. He was then set up. It's a long story. It was complicated. We can't get in, or we don't have anything else to talk about today. But we ended up going up and trying that case. It was in Flint, Michigan. It was a 5-week trial. It was a very long trial. It
was an intense trial, too. Because the attorney, the state attorney, both of them were kind of like difficult.
Difficult being nice. They were callous and uncaring and not good human beings. Cruel human beings. Similar to what they did to the Griffys. But so I had Steve come up, and as a little sidetrack, so we're staying at this little hotel. No. Yeah, we're staying at this little hotel by the Bishop Airport in Flint. I was, at a different stage in my career at that time, and we were staying at like the Residence Inn or something. And there was like weed smoke coming under the doors at night and stuff. And I'm walking Steve to his hotel room. I got Steve a hotel room. I got you one. And we walk in, and I open up the door to your room, and there's a guy jerking it in your bed with his shorts around his ankles. Remember?
Yeah, he was.
And it was like, whoa!
Yeah.
I don't know who was more surprised, him to see us or us to see him.
I think he probably had a bad time after that.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. But, the trial itself, one of the pivotal moments in the trial, it seemed to me, was the moment they were cross-examining Mrs. Griffy. And she was on the stand he had her on cross probably about an hour at least. And it's just hammering her left and right. It was just ridiculous.
And she was the nicest lady.
She's, very gentle,
genuine, right?
Courteous. And at one point, there was an incident where she walked in the office and all the other POs were, sitting around and her laughing, guffawing, like, something. And they say, hey, come over here, check this out, check this out. One of their parolees apparently had adopted an African-American kid. Right?
And it's a white parole family.
It's a white, and one of the guys who was the parolee actually was an Aryan dude. It was like
Aryan Nation.
Aryan Nation type guy.
Nazi type stuff.
And they said, oh, look at that. This is hilarious. So they adopted an African-American kid. And guess what? Their name is Coon, right?
Coon.
and they thought it was hilarious, right?
Which is a horrible, if you're young and you don't know it's a horribly racist term that they used to call African Americans.
And so Lisa's on and this poor woman she had been beaten up for an hour or so, and she's just, never lost her composure whatsoever. But, you could tell she's getting tired. And the attorney,
she was a nervous wreck before that trial. She said, "John, I don't want to do this." Remember, it was horrible.
Yeah, we had to really work a lot with her
She was scared
to get her going. And the attorney for the state said, "Well, now, really, Mrs. Griffy, you know that had nothing to do with race, don't you?" And she goes, "No, it did." And he says, "Oh, come on, you know that their name was spelled Kuhn, right? That has nothing to do with race." And the look on her face was like, I mean, I'm projecting my own thoughts at this point. Are you effing kidding me?
Yeah.
Really? Nothing to do with. So it was a pivotal moment, and we started talking about closings,
Yeah, we were up in Flint. So now we fast forward, a month later?
Yeah, right.
After 41 witnesses. The state probably called 2/3 of them. But and I was nervous, Steve. So, this had been a long trial. I had just left my firm at the time and started my own firm.
Mm-hmm.
I had literally the mortgage on my house was in the case. And if I lost, was plaintiff's attorneys, we lose everything.
Yeah.
And we had an all-white jury.
Yep.
Up in Flint. And it was a conservative jury. I mean, we had like the Trump foreman guy.
Yeah, I was comfortable with them, though, to be honest with you. I mean,
they were good people.
I thought we did a good job in jury selection.
Yeah, they were good. They were good, honest people.
Yeah.
And anyways, I was nervous, and I'm trying to get ready for closing, which is tough on a 5-week long trial. It's like, there's so much stuff. What do you do?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to fail, and I was nervous. But you go ahead and so you worked with me. You're like, come into my room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just want to be alone. And you're like, no, we got to go over this.
Yeah. And we were talking, and in part of the process, in trials that, you understand perfectly now, is understanding, not just what was happening, but the meaning of what was happening. Not just the evidence, but what the evidence means, and to help to communicate that meaning to the jury, so the significance of the verdict makes a difference. And so, that was just such a key moment where their whole defense revolved around, this isn't about race at all, it's about something different, and that kind of encapsulated how absurd their thing was. So, one of the things we talked about.
Yeah, they said they were rude, but it wasn't racist.
Right, is to say, what if they had called her the N-word, right? But it was only spelled with one G.
Right.
Right? Would it be about geography then? No, of course not, right? And you're saying, oh, man, I don't know.
I didn't want to say that. I
can't say that. I can't say. I said, listen, there's power in that word. It's a powerful word, but used the right way, the power lies with what you're trying to communicate, right?
Of how offensive it was.
No, I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not. No, I can't do that, man. I just can't do that. And of course, I'm looking for, I'm looking for attorneys who have courage, right? I want to see which attorneys can overcome their fear and to break through that barrier, almost like a sound barrier. Can they go up to the sound? Can they break through the sound barrier, right? For themselves. And you decided to do it, and I'm absolutely convinced that at that point that jury just went, "Oh yeah, we get it. And you shouted it. I mean, and the jury goes, "Whoa!" like that.
Yeah.
Does that mean it wasn't about race? Of course not. That's ridiculous. And everyone was like, "Whoa! Did he just really do that?" And the jury, though, absolutely got it, and they returned a verdict that was the right verdict.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. That was a tough case. It was a righteous case, but I was nervous, man. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't.
But see, that's the thing. That more than anything else convinced me that you were really going to be a very, very good lawyer, because you had the courage to to push back, to push against that fear, and to understand meaning, to understand the meaning of evidence, and to be able to communicate that meaning to jurors.
Yeah,
right. That's a really
now, to be
important trait
fair,
to have.
everything that Steve ever tells me is always what we get in motions on appeal. that say that Jon Marko prejudiced the jury. Look at what he said.
Yeah, right.
He said the N-word.
Yeah, right.
Look at what he said. Yeah. It's everything that Steve convinces me to say gets put in the motion for a new trial afterwards of Jon Marko is inflammatory and prejudicial.
Yeah, right.
But no, I mean, you're an
the court affirmed it.
Yeah,
they said
we got a unanimous
good. Yeah.
affirming on the Court of Appeals. It was the right thing, and justice was done.
Yep.
Thank God. But
yeah, really.
But yeah. So tell me, all right. So Steve, tell me about one of like the craziest cases, because you've been involved in thousands of cases.
No.
Hundreds of cases.
Hundreds of cases. Yeah.
Tell me just off the cuff now for our listeners, one of the craziest cases.
Anyone who's ever done a trial knows that every trial is a trial gone wild, because no trial ever
goes
according
the
way
to
you plan. Right.
And anything can happen.
Yep. But I'll have to say, I was involved with a trial with Jeff Feiger, and it involved a guy named Jerry, a kid named Jerry. It's, just one of those waifs, one of those kids in life that got, foster care, when he was young, got into juvie when he was like 15.
And this is the client? This is the plaintiff?
This is the client, yeah, the plaintiff. And he finally gets out of juvie, because he aged out, basically, more than anything else. And he got a job in a steel plant. And he was like shoveling scrap of steel, so that it wouldn't pile up on the floor. And they constructed this huge 16-foot steel wall that was 3 inches thick, but they only supported it on one side, right?
So the steel plant constructed this wall?
Right.
Without him. Like he didn't build the wall.
No, he didn't build the wall. He didn't have anything to do with it. They just said, okay, just push the scraps up against this wall and we'll just, brush it right out. So, of course, he's pushing the scrap up against the wall, and, they've got these huge steel, these rollers, where the slabs of steel roll across it, right? And they're about 16 inches apart. Well, this steel wall collapses. It falls over because it was only supported on one side.
How big was this wall?
16 foot high and 3 inches thick.
Steel wall?
Yeah.
And don't tell me it fell on the kid.
It fell on him, and it crushed him in between two of the rollers. So his body was crushed in 16 inches, of these rollers. And he was pinned there until they could get a crane to lift the thing off.
How long was he pinned there?
It was quite a long time, because he suffered hypoxic damage to his brain.
Oh, my God. Did he live?
He lived, yeah. And he had crush injuries all over. I mean,
so he was just
every
messed
one
up.
of his ribs was crushed. He suffered a pneumothorax. He had hypoxic
brain damage.
Injury. Yeah, right.
Oh, so he's just messed up.
He was messed up.
So did the steel mill say, we screwed up. We built this shitty ass wall and it fell on our dude?
No, they didn't. They denied any kind of liability. With
Always,
it, right?
man.
Right.
Always.
So we're going to trial, and on the day of trial, and this is going to be a big trial, we know it. So the jury pool, we had, in those days there was a big enough courtroom where they could support about 100 people in the pool.
Wow. Is this Wayne County or
Wayne
Detroit?
County.
Okay.
Wayne County. And I wish I could remember the name of the judge. I can't remember
was it
right now.
Kathleen McDonald?
I don't know for sure. But we had, so we're first day, we have the pool in there, Jeff's there. Jeff Danzig is, the associate who worked it up, and I'm there, and we're getting ready for jury selection, and we're kind of watching things, and the judge is doing the preliminary voir dire and says, anybody here that, this is the case. Anybody here think that they won't be able to serve? And this guy raises his hand. Of course, a lot of people raise their hand.
Right. Well, he's got a vacation or whatever, some
right.
bullshit, right?
So she goes, all right, all you people raising your hand, if you get called into the box, then you can tell me why you don't think you could do it, right? So we go through the entire morning, we're going through one person next, and so we're going to break for lunch. And she says, okay, we're going to break for lunch. We're going to come back afterwards, And this guy says, Judge, I really can't serve on this jury. And she goes, just to wait until after lunch. She goes, no, Judge, there's something I need to tell you. And so she's, gets a little bit irritated with him and says, all right, I'll tell you what, you're going to stay here. I'm going to put you under oath, and you're going to tell me why you can't, be a juror in this trial. So all the jurors leave, and we're sitting there, and, we're going like, okay, well, whatever. This guy just wants it out of the
off the pool, right?
Right. So he gets on the stand. She swears them in. And she goes, all right, now you tell me why you can't be, a jury in this trial. He goes, well, Judge, I was the safety, coordinator for the plant who did the original investigation on this accident, and they fired me after I submitted a report saying it was their fault.
Stop it!
I know.
Stop
no,
it!
You wouldn't believe it. It's
Dude,
I swear to God,
are
that
you
was the
making
truth.
this up?
No,
This
I
is the
swear
most.
it's the truth.
It has to be
What are the
divine
odds?
intervention.
What are the odds out of all the jury pool and all of Wayne County?
Hundreds of thousands of people.
And they hit this guy, and they hit his report, right?
So you're telling me that one of the jurors who got called to trial on this case
Yep.
was the guy who investigated this wall collapsing on your client,
Yep.
and he told the steel mill, this wall was unsafe, it's your fault.
Right.
That's the whole case.
And then they fired him.
And then they fired this guy
Yeah.
to hide it.
Right. We had no idea he existed.
This is like divine
Nothing.
intervention. This is the
I know.
law
It's
gods.
like only with
of
Jeff
like,
Feiger.
Oh
only,
my
you know,
God.
Right. Only that could have. And so, like, we're looking at each other like, what the, and we're going like, default,
Yeah,
man, default.
yeah.
And so, Jeff goes crazy on it, they're denying any knowledge of their attorneys are denying any knowledge of it. And
right.
so the judge says, I'm not going to give you a default, but I'm going to do you one better. He's going to be your first witness. Right? So she did the right thing. And he was our first witness.
Was the guy, he was your first witness?
Yeah, he was our first witness.
Did the jury, was they like, yeah, that's the guy that just was in the jury?
Yeah, yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
And so he testified that it was...
He testified that he did the initial investigation. It was his determination that, it was a poor design and that they were at fault. And that, his manager said, you need to change this report. He refused to change it. When he refused to change the report, they fired him.
Well, now tell me, I don't want to assume things, but I'm assuming you guys won.
We did win. But that wasn't the last thing that was weird in that case.
What?
Yeah, right. I know. So, like, at another point in the trial, we're, our guy is on the stand, and we're a little bit worried about it because, remember, he has brain damage, but he doesn't have the kind of brain damage where it's apparent to people
who don't know him.
Who don't know it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's always the hardest to deal with
Right.
clients is somebody gets brain damage and they look kind of normal.
Yeah.
But if you talk to other loved ones who knew them beforehand, they're like, it's a totally different person.
Yeah, right.
Right. But
Right.
it's juries are skeptical and they have a natural tendency, I think, to think that plaintiffs' attorneys especially are making things
Right,
up, or the
right.
injured person's making things up.
Yeah.
But anyways, I digress. So
And they, he's not drooling on himself, so he must be okay or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless it's apparent. So we're worried because he's very impulsive, and he says things, almost like he had Tourette's in a certain way. Although I think his pre-morbid personality was a little bit on the sociopathic side, anyways. But anyway, so he gets on the stand and we go through it, direct, and that went pretty well. And then it gets on cross, and at a certain point, the attorney for the defendant say, "Well, can you ever, are you able to change the tire on your van?" He goes, "No, I can't do that." He goes, "Are you sure you can't change the tire on your van?"
who
He goes,
was this defense attorney?
I'm not going to say.
All right. I feel like they should be called out for all these shenanigans.
Yeah.
But I understand. All right.
So anyways, and Jerry says, "No, I can't. It's too painful. I don't have the strength, And he goes, "Well, didn't you change the tire on your van 2 weeks ago?" And he goes, "No." And he goes, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, we happen to have this video surveillance, right?" Now,
That's like every plaintiff's worst nightmare.
Right.
That's my worst nightmare. It's like I'm in the middle of trial and it's like I've told the jury about my case, my client, and then it's like, oh, well, look at this secret evidence
right.
that like you didn't know about and that, your client maybe didn't tell you about or whatever it is.
right. And it's always out of context. So you could read into it, whatever, and they want you to read the negative things.
If you
about
take
it,
anybody's Facebook profile, it's like all the best snapshots of their life, even though I know people who are complete miserable people.
Yeah.
And you look at their Facebook, you're like, oh my God, or their marriage is great.
Yeah.
And when inside, they're
Right.
like, it's a disaster. But anyways.
So here now we had talked. Jeff and I talked. I said, listen, this guy, his lifestyle, we need to make sure we have any video surveillance. And so, he made a motion. They had to produce any video. They said we have no video evidence whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they said in court on the record, we're not going to introduce any video.
This
evidence.
is just like that trial we had with the city of Detroit.
Yeah.
We promise.
Right, yeah.
There is none.
Right.
There will be one. Then in the middle of trial, look what we got.
Yeah,
You
right.
know?
So we see the video. So the judge. So we go crazy, right? It's like, oh, come on now, they're violating your order, judge, da-da-da. But the jury already knows
There's
that they've
video.
got something. So the jury's,
And sometimes it's worse what they imagine than what is
right,
in reality.
exactly. So now, what are we going to do? So she dismisses the jury, and we're going to talk about we're arguing out. Well, Jerry leans over to me and he says, that's not me. I says, what do you mean? He goes, that's not me. That's my brother. That's in front of my brother's house. He changed the tire for me. I said, are you lying to me? He goes, no, man, I swear to God, that's my brother. I says, well, let's call your brother right now, right? And I'll talk to him first. And so I called up his brother and I said, hey, listen, have you changed the tire on your brother's van anytime? He goes, yeah. I said, well, how long ago? It's about 2 weeks ago. About what time? Well, it's about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening. I said, can you be down here in court like right now, right? And so I go back and Jeff and I talk about it and we say, okay, what are we going to do? And I says, well, let's show the video, right? But so he cuts a deal with the judge and he says, okay, we're going to show the video to the jury, but you have to instruct the jury that they violated a court order producing that video. So, of course, she comes in and says, okay, that's what we're going to do, right? Now, in the meanwhile...
did the defense attorney still think it was your client?
Well, they were getting wind. When his brother showed up, they started getting a little nervous and antsy,
yeah, they
right?
better get nervous.
Right? And so now our guy, Jerry, again, he's impulsive and he's got brain damage, He's like, MF for this, MF for that, lying SOBs, like...
In front of the jury?
No, not in front of the jury, but in the courtroom, right? And I'm saying, Jerry, go out in the hallway, right? Which was a mistake on my part because the videographer was in the hallway, right?
What video? Explain to listeners who aren't lawyers what a videographer.
Videographers, that's the guy who actually took the video and is testifying that he took the video and that's what the video
like the
shows.
Undercover private investigator guy.
Yeah, like the PI guy.
The PI.
Yeah, I took this video. This is when I took it. That's what it shows.
Yeah. So the PI who took a video of your client's brother, but thought it was your client was out in the hall.
Right.
And you send your client
and of course, Jerry's like, and so I thought, oh, wait a minute. So I get out there, and of course, Jerry's like, oh, you lying SOB, I ought to kick your ass, that sort of stuff, right? And I'm going, Jerry, get over here. I said, listen, I'm telling you right now, all right? If you do that again, I'm going to kick your ass myself, right? And he goes, I'm sorry, man. I'll be okay. I'll be cool. I said, listen, when you go back in there, you look down at the table. I don't want you even to look up. Don't even look up. Look down at the table. Look sad. Don't say a word, right? He goes, okay, man, I'll do that. So we go back in, and they apparently figured it out. The defense figured it out. So they have the videographer on there, and the jury's in now. And the judge says, well, I want the jury to know that we're going to show you the video, but, you need to understand this is in violation of a court order. They were ordered to produce all video evidence. They did not produce this in violation of my order, but the plaintiffs have agreed to show the video.
Good.
And so the defense attorney gets up and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, judge, we don't need to show the video. We discovered we made a mistake, and then the videographer's on the stand, it's a young guy. And he says, well, do you have something to say to the jury? And he goes, yeah, I want to apologize to the jury. I made a mistake. I don't think that was, Mr. Such and such. And he goes, well, do you have anything to say to the judge? And he goes, yeah.
Who's saying this, Jeff?
The defense attorney.
Okay.
The defense attorney's got the guy. And so the defense attorney goes, do you have anything to say to the judge too? And he goes, well, yeah, I want to apologize to the judge too. I didn't mean to cause any commotion, and the judge. So the judge now Jerry the whole time was like, he's looking down. And he's like, not reacting at all. And so the judge goes, do you have anything to say to Mr. Such and such, to Jerry? And he looks at Jerry and he says, I apologize. Man, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Jerry now, who had just 10 minutes earlier was like,
MF.
committing, threatening homicide, right? Looks up and he goes, that's okay, man. Everybody makes mistakes. And the jury, the women are crying out the jury, what a great guy. What a wonderful human being, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was just one of several things that went, weird.
Gosh, you can't
trial.
make that stuff up. I mean, that's insane.
No.
That's like my cousin Vinny stuff.
Yeah. What are the odds, right, of of the guy who we had no knowledge of him whatsoever, shows up in the
Dude, it has
pool.
to be like 1 in a million or so, or even more. Even more.
Right.
I mean, that they would get
Right.
called to jury duty, then they would get called in that particular
In that
case.
and be in that pool.
It is insane.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping you guys won. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, big verdict on that
Yeah,
case.
it was a good one.
Yeah,
It was
I'm
decent.
sure
I think it was 18 or 24 million. I can't remember.
I mean, I'm sure the jury was probably pissed. It sounds like there was a lot of shenanigans that went on. And
Well, yeah, because they're reacting to the way that the defense handled the trial as much as the evidence, and really that was some of the meaning in this case, is that this is a corporation who's exercising all of their power, and their resources to cheat an individual who they had horribly injured, right?
yeah. And one thing that seems to me, if the defendants in a case like that case, for example, instead of doing all this shady stuff and hiding and lying, and I mean, how hard is it on a base level? You can only dress it up so much. You built a bad wall, it fell on a guy.
Yeah.
If they just came in and said, we're really sorry, we screwed up, we take responsibility, but we need to come to a reasonable verdict or reasonable amount of compensation, they would have probably fared a lot better, don't you think?
I think so. I think that's almost always the case, but unfortunately, the way the system is right now, the defense attorney, even if they had a compassionate, perspective on the victims that they're essentially defending the case against, has that perspective. It's the insurance company that's driving, the legal process at that stage, and it's some guy, some actuarial who's saying, well, we've got, the odds of getting a verdict on this are such and such, and the odds of getting, a verdict above a certain amount is such and such, so it's worth trying.
It doesn't matter. It's just worth,
it doesn't matter. They have
it's
no
worth
sense.
rolling the dice.
Right. It's an actuarial table for them, whereas, it's compassion for us, it's compassion for the victims and individuals,
I mean, but that's goes back to if people heard of the Ford Pinto. I mean, remember back in the day, the Ford Pinto was a car that was badly designed, where if it got hit in an accident, the gas tank was so near the rear bumper that the car would blow up.
Yeah.
Right. And Ford Motor Company knew about it, and they had their bean counters get together and said, it'll be cheaper for us to just defend these cases. Maybe we'll lose a lot and then pay rather than admit we did something wrong and fix the problem. Right. Which is morally is a despicable, reprehensible,
and
evil,
fundamentally unjust.
Right. Now, I had a case that you remind me where, the surveillance is always our worst nightmare because it can be taken out of context. They don't give you the surveillance showing your guy limping along. They hide that.
Yeah, they don't show. They may show an hour of a person's life out of 23 hours of horrible suffering and pain. They may show an hour worth of video where they're doing fairly normal things.
Yeah, getting something out of the fridge or something. But they don't show you them, holding their back afterwards or something.
Right.
But I had a case where this guy was disabled, and we go to this evaluation on the case. We go to a hearing, and part of our thing was he was so messed up from this car crash that this guy can't mow his own lawn. He can't do things around the house. And they had a video of a guy, pushing a mower, mowing this big ass lawn and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the case is over. I go to my client, you lied. Look at this. He's like, that's my brother, man.
Yeah.
And it was a fat guy, and my client was skinny. And it blows up in their face. Yeah. I mean, but
more often it's the case where they actually show the plaintiff, and they're trying to do normal things, right? And they're doing it, and what happens is, instead of the jury having the perspective of, well, good for them, they're trying to get on with their life, they're trying to get past it. That's what we want people to do. We want them to try and get past their pain and to try and have as normal life as they can. Their perspective is, oh, they're lying in order to get money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they essentially penalize, the victim for trying to get better, which is what we want people to do.
Yeah.
But the videos are always a bad thing for plaintiffs. The best you can do, like we do all the time now, right, is to get our video, get that evidence ahead of time, and show it to our medical experts, and to present it in our part of the case
Yeah.
as something that helps us, and have our medical experts say, you see that little subtle thing? It's, you might not catch it unless you're a doctor, or a PT or PMNR like I am. The way he moved his arm, that's an adjustment because of pain.
Yeah.
And that proves that he's having pain in that area of his elbow or his shoulder or whatever, right?
It's still hard. I mean, you remember that case we did, that really nice guy, and he was a Aramark delivery guy, and he got rear-ended by a drunk driver on the way to work. He was the nicest guy in the world. He was going to work on a Sunday just to like preload his truck, even though he wasn't getting paid for it. And he hurt his back really bad, but he continued to work. And he admitted, he said, look, I got a family. Like, I go to work, but now when I get home from work, I got to lay on the couch because I can't do anything because my back is so messed up. And they just showed, their whole case was just showing like video after video of him working.
Right,
He said he could work.
Yeah.
He said I can work, but they didn't show him laying on his couch afterwards. We got a verdict, but I mean, it really hurt the value of the case.
It did. It does. And the best you can do, like I said, you have to co-opt the video. You have to use the video in your part of the case.
Yeah.
And have the juror's perspective on it be your perspective, your frame of reference on it, right?
So do you remember the first case we ever did together?
Wow. I don't. I'm not sure I do.
Our client was a guy, kind of eccentric. He cut hair in Berkeley, Michigan.
Yeah.
We were in Oakland County Circuit Court in front of Judge Warren.
Right.
Okay?
Loved his pot.
Yeah. Our client, not Judge Warren, that's for sure.
No, not Judge Warren. No. Yeah, let me clarify.
Yeah.
Although it wouldn't hurt him.
Yeah. He, so it was just so you know, this was Judge Warren's a very smart, very good judge, and he lets you try your case, but he's a very strict judge.
Yeah.
I mean, he follows the rules, and he expects you to follow the rules, and expects you to be prepared, and he's a no nonsense, no bullshit type of guy.
Right.
I have a lot of respect for him, and I've tried many cases in front of him, and he really lets you try your case. But he's not the type of guy that you want to mess around with. And our client was an eccentric, kind of goofy guy who was seriously hurt. So if you remember, he had shoulder surgery.
Yeah.
Went to a PT clinic and got on the machine, and he got on the machine, and it was an assisted dip machine. So it's one of those machines that you do your workouts on, right? And it has a pulley with the weights on, right? So they're like rehabbing this guy's busted ass shoulder, and the machine starts making all these weird noises, like wah, wah, wah. And he goes and he tells the guy, there's something wrong with this machine. And the guy goes, don't be a wimp, Pat.
Yeah.
Don't be a wimp. Get back on the machine.
Right.
And he gets back on the machine, starts doing the exercises, and the whole pulley system blows.
Yeah.
Because it was like the screws were loose or something, and the whole pulley system blew, and he fell because there was no weights, and he ripped his shoulder again.
Right.
And
it was a complete severing of his rotator cuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, should have been an easy case.
Yeah.
Easier case. I did the best I could, but part of the problem was our client would have these outbursts in the middle of trial. In fact, he would yell and stuff at witnesses who were testifying and be like, that's not true, or just a weird. He was an eccentric guy.
Yeah.
And the judge, remember, had to tell him, if you make one more outburst, I'm kicking you out of your own trial.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign.
No, not in front of the jury.
Not in front of the jury.
Yeah.
So we go, and the big pivotal moment of the case is having your own client testify. And so I'm like, Pat, we got it. You got to be calm. I know, I know you're a little eccentric, don't get excited. He's like, don't worry. He's like, well, I'm like, well, let's work over lunch. He's like, I got to go get something out of my car. So he comes back from his car, and we're sitting in the cafeteria. Do you remember this?
In the basement, yeah.
In the basement of Oakland County Circuit Court. And this guy is stoned to the bone. And he had just smoked a joint in the parking lot of the Oakland County Circuit Court before we have to get on the bench in front of a very no-nonsense judge.
Right.
And I'm freaking out, man. Do you remember?
Yeah. I was freaking out too. I mean, what can you do at that
What
point?
can you do?
Yeah.
Judge, my client is too high to go on the stand. And he says, "Don't worry, man. It's all cool, bro. I'm fine." I'm like, "Are you high?" He's like, "No, man, it's going to help, man. It's going to be chill.
Yeah.
It's going to be chill." It wasn't too chill, was it?
No.
It was not
That
too
reminds
chill.
me of another case I had with Jeff, where he did a little witness prep, let's put it that way, where it was a horrible case in South Bend, a police case where our guy had a closed-head injury from a previous accident.
Brain injury from previous accident.
Then he got into another accident, and he was having difficulty, and the police beat him, and they slammed his head on the cement floor at holding cell. It created a hematoma, so he became less and less. He became more and more disoriented, more and more confused, and less cooperative. So they actually secured him into like a restraint chair, where the arms and the legs are there, and then
so that's where you sit in a chair and they bind you, basically.
Right. You can't move your arms, you can't move your legs, right? And they put and they sprayed him with OC-10.
What's OC-10?
It's pepper spray.
While he's in the restraint chair.
Right. While he's in the restraint chair, they open up his mouth, they spray it in his mouth.
Inside the mouth?
Inside the mouth. They sprayed it up his nose.
You got to be kidding me.
No, it was
Are
torture.
they allowed to do that?
No, of course not. It's torture. That's torture. That you talk about, use of force. That was a totally unjustified use of force, because he presented no danger to anyone in the restraint chair. Anyways, the defense could not find an expert in the country, a police expert, who could say that was legitimate force, right? But they did find a guy who was a sociologist who wrote a book on the sociology of police tactics.
What the hell does that even mean? The sociology of police tactics. What does that mean?
Basically, he did a history. Back in the 1800s,
it was okay
police
to do
would
that?
beat the crap out of a guy this way, and then in the 20s they beat him this way. Right in the 40s,
listen,
they do it this way.
Based on past beatings of hundreds of years, this was
minor.
This
was okay. So, anyways, Jeff comes in, he's giggling, and I'm going, what are you doing? It's like there's like eight officers are defendants, and the lawyers. He says, "You should see this guy. He looks like Mr. Magoo, man. He looks like Mr. Magoo. You got to see him. You got to see him." I said, "Okay, whatever, Jeff." He goes, "No, really, come on, man. I got to show you." He gets, he would get enthusiastic and excited about it. And I looked down the hallway, and sure enough, the guy looked just like the cartoon character, Mr. Magoo. So he's sitting in the back of the courtroom, and all of a sudden, there's this big commotion, and all the officers get up and they run to the back of the courtroom. And I look back, and there's Jeff. And he's being, pushed back by one of the defense attorneys. And there's the witness sitting down, yelling at Jeffrey, right?
Mr. Magoo guy?
Mr. Magoo guy, right? And so I go back. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I go back. I got to be next to Jeff. I can't, I'm not going to leave my guy hanging. So, we get him back. So I said, "What'd you do, man?" He goes, "Nothing, man. I just asked him a few questions about his sexual preference, right?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "How's that relevant to anything?" And he goes, "Nothing. I just wanted to see what he was like, But the guy was so upset that he turned beet red. It was like he had an anabuse reaction. I mean, he was like beet red. You know how if you take niacin, you flush red?
Yeah.
That's what he looked like. And he was just so that the judge, we demanded a voir dire on his expertise to qualify him as an expert, because he's obviously not qualified as an expert.
I don't know how a sociologist for police could testify as to force.
So the judge interrupts the voir dire in the middle. He goes, "Sir, are you okay? Are you feeling well?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm good." And the judge goes, "Do you have a medical condition or something that we need to be?" No, right? And so judge says, "Okay, go ahead and continue." So he lets him continue for a little while later. Then he stops it. The judge stops it and says, "Okay," this is a federal judge. Says, "Okay, I want you to leave the courtroom, and I want to, talk with the attorneys on the record." And so the witness leaves. Mr. Magoo leaves, right, in the hallway, and the judge says, "Counselors," he's talking to different counselors, "Are you sure you want this witness to testify? Because there's something wrong with him. He's either intoxicated or on drugs, or there's some sort of medical condition he has, but there's something wrong with him. He's not right." And they're saying, "Judge, well, he's our only expert. We don't have any other expert. He's got to testify." And he goes, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And they say, "Yeah." And Jeff, and I talk about it. I said, I could get him disqualified, but I think he's good testifying. I said, "You know what? I think he probably will help our case."
So what
and
happened?
He testified. Well, he testified, and it didn't go the way they had planned it, and we ended up winning that case too. I think that was a $60 million verdict or something.
Yeah, it's those little things, man, that you just never can plan for, right?
Yeah.
In these trials.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for watching our episode today. This has been part 1 of our podcast, Cases Gone Wild with Steve Hnat. Stay tuned. We couldn't fit everything in a one episode, so we're going to continue this in 2 weeks. You're going to hear the second part of this podcast. Don't forget to check out our website. Follow us, www.markolaw.com. That's MARKO law.com. There's a podcast page. There's links to our YouTube so you can watch this live, or you can follow us. If you need help with any of your legal needs, please contact us. If it's outside our practice area, we'll get you to somebody who can. Or call our phone number, which is 313-777-7-LAW. We'll see you in 2 weeks.